Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone has to click the got it. All right, let me introduce Jade Fraundorfer. So thanks, Jade, for agreeing to be this month's AKR Forum speaker. Jade Fraundorfer is one of the remote members of Redwood Kyudo, and he's therefore a member of the Northern California Kyudo Federation, but he is head of his own dojo, which is in Florida. He's with the South Florida Kyudo Kai. He's founded that group. And Jade is also the founder of the South Africa Kyudo Federation. Jade's going to tell us about his reflections on these experiences. So handing it over to Jade.
Thank you, Maria Sensei. So can everybody see the slides?
Yeah.
The first slide?
Yes.
All right, everyone can hear me, and I'm sure everyone's logged on who's going to be participating. Okay, so let's get started. So, afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining the AKA Forum for the month of September. So let me introduce myself again. For those who don't know me already, my name is Jade Fraundorfer. I'm originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. So now you can stop guessing the accent. It is not British or Australian. Or New Zealand for that matter. So today's talk will be on my reflections of setting up a Kyudo and a Renmei in South Africa. Now, a topic such as this is very hard to condense into a short conversation, so I'll try my best to convey what challenges, triumphs, highs and lows I have endured on this journey. Also, there are many other Kyudo who have undertaken similar paths, so I'm in no way unique, but I can at least share some of my experiences with you, and who knows, you might have similar ones. I would like to encourage people to ask questions. Feel free to add a comment or share a short story of your own experience. So please stop me from talking too much. All right. Over the years, I've learned a great deal about the process behind the forming of Kyudo groups, formalizing Kyudojo, as well as founding and running a federation. I have a great deal of people to thank for the involvement along the way. I have further experienced that it has been imperative to learn from and to be able to work with others more seasoned than you, that ego has no place if you're going to achieve this. One needs to be a people's person and to be able to play nice with others, resolve conflict, support others, and be willing to receive support and constructive criticism in return. I've also come to realize that it sometimes can be very lonely, especially if you are the only one driving that energy, and it can take a toll on your personal and family life. Staying focused and continuously working on trying to stay positive will get you through the tough times. Any small measure of moving forward is progress, and being patient is key. I say this and I laugh, as I've only learned the value of true patience and timing as I've matured with age, like a good wine. When I was much younger, I was impatient. I rushed the work and required all of the fruits of my labor, well, to bear fruit. So seriously, you have to realize that you're in this for the long run and that things take time. This is not about instant gratification. I first experienced Kyudo whilst on a karate tour in Japan in 2002. As with most startup organizations, it commences with an idea. And it was only in 2007 that my idea of moving forward with Kyudo would come to fruition. If I look back, I don't think it was my initial intention to found or create a Kyudo, but rather the love of Japanese culture and the desire to pursue Kyudo in my own personal capacity that moved me in this direction. However, with nothing even remotely close to Kyudo in South Africa, to pursue Kyudo, I would need to create something from scratch. So being rather methodical, it was a step-by-step process of setting myself up before expanding into attracting students. First of all, we would need a facility to train from. and equipment would need to be sourced. These were the first of many obstacles that I would have to face. Finding a recreational facility that would not only be able to cater to the needs of indoor archery, but willing to do so, especially for a kind of archery that was never heard of before, proved to be difficult. After eventually finding a community center to train from, both the facility and the times available to use were not ideal to my long-term vision. So to really succeed, I would need to create a venue of my own. What was also initially difficult was the funding of equipment. Sponsorships were only being granted to major sporting organizations, and the only martial art receiving support was the Olympic judo clubs. So in short, I was accustomed to being let down and would have to save all the required monies myself. A further obstacle back in those days was, of course, being in Africa and trying to convince Japanese Kyudo shops to deal with us. This meant that things would take a little longer, as equipment could only be acquired over time once relationships with Kyudo shops in Japan could be established and when my personal resources would allow for it. If I look forward to now with having set up a new Kyudojo in Florida, the startup funds always came from my personal resources. In my experience, canvassing for sponsorship for something that does not yet exist can be both onerous and disappointing. It therefore always takes a great deal of initial personal sacrifice in both time and finances if you're going to form a Kyudojo and be responsible for leading it. But let's get back to South Africa again. In 2009, I managed to secure a lease on a small private piece of land located adjacent to the property where I resided. As this was intended to be a short-term lease, construction was limited to non-permanent structures. This dojo would therefore only have been transient until a more suitable opportunity would arise. Whilst busy, nice picture of me there with my shovel after learning how to build a maktoba on my own through a Kyudo book. Whilst busy setting up the Kyudojo, I began marketing by first contacting the local area newspapers. The plan was to create interest around the project, as well as to let people know about the existence of Kyudo, the way of the bow. This was way before Facebook and other social media platforms. As the news of a Kyudojo spread, we were constantly receiving more people interested in seeing Kyudo. Our initial recruits were all avid martial artists from local dojos who wanted to take the opportunity to experience this new art form. We were finally starting to grow. This would eventually pique the interest of the Embassy of Japan in Pretoria and its cultural attaché, as well as other cultural organizations, thus creating the opportunity to do Kyudo demonstrations at the various cultural events. As time passed, I started to feel embarrassed of our small rickety Kyudojo, as the group had surpassed the size that this makeshift dojo could support. Something had to be done if we were going to take this to the next level. Looking at all the overseas Kyudojo made me very aware that we had a long way to go. This was also a hard time for me. I had such a drive, but not all the means at my disposal, which frustrated me greatly. I would just have to learn to work through these personal challenges until an opportunity would present itself. In 2010, my personal life changed radically, and I met my partner, who became my biggest advocate for my dreams. I've always understood that my martial arts and my personal life would always somehow be intertwined. Maybe this was the universe telling me, now with the newfound support, that the next stage of growing Kyudo in South Africa could take place. In 2011, my partner and I started on plans for building a larger and more authentic Kyudojo. And in August of that year, we entered into a contract with the city for a piece of beautiful land behind a large community center, complete with pro tennis and huge bowls club we would need to develop. As with any development, this piece of land would prove to be challenging in working with the city later during our construction phase. Now, both my partner and I admit to being extremely talented. We both have that go-getter attitude, together with maybe just a sprinkle of good luck here and there. We've always been able to achieve a great deal, especially since we have backgrounds and experience in design, manufacturing, and operations. We, in our infinite wisdom, thought we could handle breaking ground and leveling the site. Seriously, how hard could it be, right? Well, with one bulldozer, one R8 driver, and 6 hours later, we had our levels totally upside down and messed up. In the picture, you can see the bulldozer driver with his hands up with the full of dirt there, and he's like, where do I put it? Lucky for us, on that same day, we were to meet with a company that would be putting up the steel structure and the roof. Seeing us struggle and feeling very sorry for the both of us, the owner offered to step in and assist. He marched off to his truck and hauled out all his fancy equipment that just so happened to have. We had an engineer and a land surveyor rolled up into one individual who within 3 hours had our site accurately leveled. Oh, and one very happy bulldozer driver too. If I look back on the vast majority of all my funny stories, mostly when doing something Kyudo related. For example, our trips to Japan, building a dojo, shinsa, and so on. I think we all have this in common. I quit my job that week, and 3 construction workers, including myself, spent 16 months building, finishing construction of the dojo in September of 2012. I helped dig every foundation trench, laid nearly every single brick, and with a shovel mixed tons of concrete and brick mortar. We always had a funny story. My best friend was a trowel, and Travis's best friend was a rake. Now let's get back to the point on the later challenges with the city of Johannesburg. City permits and plans were easy to contend with. However, they would eventually inform us that although they supported this initiative, they would not be able to allocate a budget to connect the dojo to existing electrical and plumbing infrastructure. This, of course, was a huge blow to us, as we had surpassed 70% of the build. This would mean us coming up with additional monies to pull electrical and plumbing and try and make the connections ourselves. But it was not all doom and gloom. There were, of course, valuable and entertaining learning experiences as well throughout this whole process. My family helped with the creation of the beautiful landscape gardens, including planting of indigenous trees and succulents, both within the surrounding structure. We laid paver stones, built planter boxes from brick and mortar, and laid pathways to complete the surroundings. Students helped with the floor and the building of the matoba, as well as the internal painting of the dojo. This was done over a period of 3 years after the dojo's official opening. My spouse and I put in a great deal of blood, sweat, and tears into that dojo. And if I look back now, I know I'm crazy. No, seriously, I'm grateful that I was able to have experienced this. And to be honest, it made that building more than just a place to train Kyudo. It was infused with our energy from the very first brick and would eventually be the place where I would tie the knot. Now that the Johannesburg dojo was sorted and are fully operational with our current members, I embarked on a bigger marketing campaign, and through this was able to attract a larger audience throughout South Africa, namely in the other provinces. Whilst busy with Kyudo in Johannesburg, I had amassed many emails with regards to Kyudo in Cape Town. Finally, in early 2014, with too many to ignore, we started with plans on forming a Cape Town Kyudo group. In July 2014, we hosted our first formal Kyudo demonstration with 20 people in attendance. Again, all avid martial artists. It was from there that we were able to form the Kyudo Club of Cape Town. Now that we had Kyudo in two of our major provinces, Gauteng and Western Cape, my next step was to select and develop senior members within these two dojo, with the intention of forming what I then called the dojo leadership team. The plan was to grow each individual not only from a Kyudo point of view, but from a coaching and leadership roles. I envisaged that they would one day eventually branch out and create their own groups, thus making Kyudo even more accessible to the public throughout South Africa. The newly formed dojo leadership team attending many national sporting, martial arts coaching programs, eventually taking the National Sporting Coaches exam and receiving our Level 3 National Coaches and Leaderships qualifications. Late 2014, we officially formed the All South African Kyudo Federation, with senior members from the dojo leadership team at the helm. The South African Kyudo Federation was to gain further footholding by becoming a member of the South African National Archery Association, the governing body for all archery in South Africa. Their decades of knowledge and experience would prove to be extremely valuable for our newly formed federation. We would find out later that this would be one of the prerequisites for applying for membership to the IKYF. As members of the National Archery Association, we attended many national open-style archery tournaments and other related events. And due to this collaboration, the size of our groups in both provinces continued to grow. Our task of attracting people to Kyudo was easy. Getting them to remain dedicated and continue training and growing with us proved to be far more challenging. When trying to then hand over responsibilities, this will then always be a problem we faced with. Unfortunately, with South Africa's massive immigration of skilled people, ourselves included, we would often lose good students that showed great potential and whom we had earmarked for roles within the dojo and the greater federation. So it's when I say we continue to grow, it wasn't without its little speed bumps and humps and so on. Now that the foundation for Kyudo in South Africa were laid, we turned our attention to our international footprint. People had heard about Kyudo in South Africa, but had seen any in action. Although we were considered a third world African country, the time had come to demonstrate what we had accomplished and the level of our Kyudo to the international Kyudo community. Our first Japan Kyudo trip and grading as a group was in Chiba in 2011 at one of the local shinsos. This was, of course, long before we had a Renmei federation. It was on this first trip that we flew the South African flag with pride and became the talking point of the senseis as the group from Minami Africa. Still to this day, everyone, oh, Minami Africa, when they meet me, if we go to Japan. If we were to be taken seriously in the eyes of the IKYF and the greater international Kyudo community, we would have to ensure we work hard on creating a positive image for Kyudo, South Africa, have our senior members aligned, students well-trained, and attend every seminar so we could eventually grow the numbers of graded members. When we found out that the 2 Asia-Oceania seminars had taken place, we formally asked the IKYF if we could also join these seminars. As the IKYF were not sure where and how to place us, we expanded on our similarities to New Zealand and Australia, and no, it's not the accent, as well as our location in the Southern Hemisphere. The convincing seemed to work, and we received a formal invitation to attend the Asia-Oceania seminars as fellow Southern Hemisphere country. We also took it upon ourselves to attend all Asia Oceania seminars from 2014, the first of which took place in Nagoya, Japan. We continue to invest our time in our social media platforms, attending Japanese cultural events and hosting both dignitaries and Kyudoka from around the world at our dojo. At the same time, we maintain constant contact with the IKYF in keeping them abreast of all our Kyudo-related activities and continued growth. During the New Zealand seminar in 2017, we were asked to meet with senior members of the IKYF. Being incredibly nervous at first, the meeting went well, and on my return, we received the prerequisites as well as the official application for membership to the IKYF. As we had complied with all but one prerequisite, the only last thing to do was to seek the necessary support letters from membership for 2 other member countries. Both the European Kyudo Association and the Taiwan Kyudo Association offered their support and sent the necessary letters to the IKYF on our behalf. In April 2018, the IKYF hosted an international seminar in Tokyo, Japan, along with the Third World Taikai. A group of members from both Johannesburg and Cape Town attended. This was to be our first international Taikai experience. On April the 23rd, at the reception dinner at the Meiji Kinenkan, we received news that South Africa had been accepted as a member nation of the IKYF. And you can see the photos of me with my big dorky smile. When I received the news, and most importantly, I was over the moon. As you can see, the photo of that day and the smile on my face was unforgettable. It was a pity that on that night at the reception dinner, I picked up a stomach bug and was sick as a dog for the rest of the seminar as well as the grading. This would be the last time I would be with the South African group at an international Kyudo seminar. In December 2019, I immigrated to Florida, USA, where I formed yet another Kyudo group and formalized it into a Kyudojo with the support of a few wonderful senior Kyudoka right here in the US of A. And this is why you find me speaking at today's AKR forum. So I would like to thank you all very much for allowing me to share my story and for your interest in my journey. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Is there any questions or anybody want to share any stories or anything along those lines?
Yeah, any questions from anyone? Please open up the chat, see if there's any questions.
I'll just comment that he's done a very good job.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Jade, was there ever a point you thought it was too much and you were considering retreating?
Oh, Sensei, yes. There were quite a few times where it just got a bit too frustrating, where, you know, the thing is, you know, you turn left and there's a wall in front of you. You sit there and you think of another idea, you turn right and you take 2 steps and another wall in front of you. And yes, there were a lot of times I never thought about giving it up. I always thought I was crazy, but I don't know, there was something just inside of me that just kept pushing me. And you know, I think one of the important things I've learned is that you don't do these kind of things on your own. You know, along the way, you meet a lot of like-minded people that really do. I mean, the kind of support that I've received over the years from people, this wouldn't have been possible. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a community, doesn't it?
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. Like I said,
sorry, go ahead.
No, carry on.
There was a question in the chat from Jeremy Kale. He asked, did you find setting up a dojo in Florida more or less difficult?
Okay, so
South Africa?
Now, not really, because I kind of, I had in my head how to do it from my experience in South Africa. What I actually found difficulty was here is how different everything works. Florida's a big Sioux state, so finding a recreation center here and saying, "Hi guys, we would like to do Kyudo and shoot arrows in your community center," and they're happy with it, but they're more worried about being sued. And figuring out the indemnity and the liability and the insurance, and then that took a little bit of. The other thing that I also faced is at our current dojo, where we train out of, it is in a light industrial district. And so I started a dojo there not knowing that I had to apply for special exception permits, which I had to learn. It took me about nearly a year and a half to complete, and never mind the amount of money that you had to throw at to get a special exception permit to be able to do a recreational activity in an industrial zone. So that was, I tell you, there was quite a few times with that I wanted to quit.
Yeah. Well, for anyone who's leading a group or thinking about leading a group, be sure to do what Jade has done and reach out to the people around you. They might be right there in your house, and they might be across the world, but I think, Jade, you've reached out and received a lot of encouragement from people across the world. Mariela asked a question. She's asking, what was the highest rank you had when you received the Federation nomination, meaning in South Africa? What was your rank?
My rank was 4th Dan.
Yondan, okay.
Was Yondan, yes.
Tani says, this is a lesson in persistence. Yes.
Oh, yes. No, definitely.
Any comments about your excellent presentation and applauses of hands and things like that?
Thank you, guys. I'm happy you enjoyed it. Having to go back and kind of like rewind into the past and think about all of these things, and obviously find all the photos, and that it was quite an experience for me, and remembering all these things that I went through, and it stirred a lot of emotions as well. And it made me even more grateful that I'd actually went through it.
So you built a few facilities. One was temporary, some are more permanent in South Africa. Are they all still in use for Kyudo today?
Yes, the main one, the Boss Crane one that you saw, is still in use today. Obviously, the first one that I did in 2009, no, that is no longer in use. So just the big one at the recreation center is still running, ticking along nicely. I'll go back on the slides. That one there. So yeah.
Nice guy.
Thank you.
Let's see the one with the scenery shot. It looks like Hawaii.
Yes, that's actually a beautiful picture of Cape Town. I see we have Mariela. In which other cities do dojos exist in South Africa? So currently we have Johannesburg and Cape Town. We have 2 dojos in those cities, and those are our biggest hubs.
So Jade, I think I know the answer, but the others might not. When you went from South Africa to Florida, you had to let South Africa fend for itself. How did they manage?
So what we basically did there is, well, they actually managed quite well. It was a little bit of a shock to the system. I think over the years, people became very accustomed to how I ran things, and again, my energy behind everything. And when I had announced that I was immigrating, it was a big shock to everyone. By then, I had earmarked people to take over roles from me. There were a lot of discussions around that, and everything kind of worked smoothly over. And COVID lockdown threw in a lot of a spanner in the works as well. So especially with the shutting down of all the Kyudo and everything, South Africa was in a hard lockdown. I mean, you have to stay home. You couldn't even leave your house unless you had to go get food and go to the hospital and things like that. But the transition was a little bit bumpy at first, and then smooth, and then a little bit bumpy again. So these things can be expected, especially when you have a big knock to an organization, when someone that's been there from the start leaves.
Yeah. Yeah, for that reason, the IKYF is a little bit careful about bringing in new countries as IKYF member countries. They want to make sure that we've established sufficient depth of leadership so that should one person leave, the others can take over, and it should be rather seamless. And I think you managed that quite well.
Yeah, thank you, Sensei.
Any final questions? Otherwise, we're going to let Jay go, and I will introduce the next month's speaker. So any final questions?
Yeah, how do you manage to balance your life between work, personal life, and Kyudo? Oh, that's quite a hard one. It's very difficult to balance it. I think I'm lucky that I have a very supportive partner. It's difficult to balance work, Kyudo, and life. It is, and I don't really have an answer to that. It just kind of works for me.
Any other questions?
Wow, that's a hard one. Thank you for the presentation. If you have 3 words, you need to make a strong group, a community. How can you construct that trust? How can you motivate people of your dojo every day? That's actually a very, very difficult question to answer. I think it comes from a leader. You know, a leader has to be constantly involved in an organization. They have to constantly, I think that was the one thing that gets tiring as a group dojo or a head dojo or a leader, is that you're constantly pushing people and organizing everything, and it is difficult, but that's where the passion comes in. You have a passion for Kyudo and for your group and your students, you're going to work really hard in keeping everybody enthusiastic and seeing people grow. I think that's the one thing that is very important for me in Kyudo, and maybe in a way it keeps me going, is watching my fellow Kyudoka grow. And that's lovely to see. I mean, we experienced that now when we were as a Florida group in Vancouver, watching my students go and through what I've been through many times and grow through that experience, and coming back and having other students that didn't come and saying, wow, those guys that attended the seminar have really grown. So that's what keeps you going.
Absolutely. I think anyone who's instructing others can relate to that. So I'd like to thank Jade on behalf of everyone who's joined. We've got Kyudoka from the Americas all over who have joined today, and additional visitors from elsewhere. And I would like to let you all know about next month's forum, which will be a talk by Michael Kennedy. And Michael will be speaking on, remember a few months ago we had a forum by Mie Takahashi sensei, and she was speaking on the Japanese mindset when it comes to practicing Kyudo. And Michael's going to speak about the Western mindset, just sort of a response to her presentation. So that will be the 4th Sunday of October, which will be October 22nd, same time. And that should actually wind up the AKR forum. So we started this event during COVID. It kept a lot of countries going, and I think it brought a lot of people together. And we've sort of come to a natural stopping point. So I wanted to thank all of the speakers who have contributed these last 3 years, and thank Jade for his talk today, and hopefully see many of you at next month's forum. Jade's presentation is being recorded. The recording will be stored on the AKR YouTube page. So Jade will be sending the recording to AKR VP Carly Bourne afterward, and then she would be posting it in a few days. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jade.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Much. Bye.